Hello, everybody, and welcome back. We are now ready for the next session and going to be joined by Christian Pho Duc, who is the Managing Director for projects at Smartenergy. And Smartenergy obviously been a strong partner of the World Hydrogen Leaders Platform. Welcome, Christian. You're in a different place.
Hi, Nadim. Yes, I'm in our headquarters in Switzerland right now, which was not possible for a while. Now I'm here.
Excellent. Good to see you. Good to see you. It's been a little while. And you were on an aeroplane yesterday, so it's very, very, very glamorous.
Yes, absolutely. You feel really like different. Actually, we want to reduce our travel activities by the learnings from the past. I think very much can be done virtually by conferences, but still sometimes it's needed. However, well, it feels really strange flying right now, I must say.
Really? Were you in Portugal or?
Yes, I was in Portugal.
Excellent. And Portugal is going to be the topic of your presentation today. Obviously, we've seen the sort of confirming of, I guess, the Portuguese strategy or hydrogen strategy into sort of real policy, or the developments of the policy pathway. So it should be good times for yourselves. So if you'd like to take control of the screen, do you have your presentation available? Yep, there it is, so we can see it.
Perfect.
Yeah. Is that good for everybody? Yeah, it seems to be on a very large size. I'm not sure if you can resize it.
Okay.
You're doing it through PDF or?
Yeah, well, it's in a very large size screen now here.
Okay.
Let me try to do it differently.
Yeah, so if you go view options, is that to do with me?
Let me try it differently.
It's original size.
Sorry for that. Somehow I clicked away where I can share the screen. Wait a second. Why is it?
No, we can see. Yeah, we can see your PowerPoint.
You can still see the PowerPoint?
Yeah. No, I can see the actual application PowerPoint. So the slide sorter. So I think if you just go into slide view, hopefully.
My main control has disappeared to share the screen. That's my problem right now. I clicked it away, and once I clicked it away, it was gone. Is it gone?
Is it on the top?
I have just a. Sorry for this.
Or if it's easier, I can share it. Have you found it?
It was hidden, but now I try again. Let me see whether this now works in a different format. Do you see something?
No. Well, we see the slide sorter, and again, it's on a very large format.
Okay. Well, I put it on my first screen. Let me do this. Sorry for a second, and hopefully
no worries.
It won't disappear again. Let me put this on this screen and then move it around here. That's well, I haven't been here in the headquarters for a while, and I have a really incredible screen here.
Okay, I'll take over and I'll share it.
I send it to you the latest version. Maybe
yeah,
you can do it and it will be in the right sizing because.
Yeah,
oh, sorry.
It should be.
Sorry. Are you trying to do it, Nadim?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of these extreme wide screens, and
so yeah, that should be okay. If you just tell me next slide, or I'll work it out.
All right, and that's actually, is this the one I just sent you before?
Yeah.
I'm not sure actually. If this is second slide, this is not the latest. Go into the first one. First one. No, in your email, there's a new one, actually.
Okay.
Sorry for this. This is from yesterday. I did some fine tuning, sorry.
No problem.
Sorry for everybody waiting. But
Yes, you're right.
let me start in the meantime.
There is a new one from
Okay, I get started in the meantime already. So hello everybody, my pleasure to be with you here. Well, I have to adapt to traveling again and having right away a new infrastructure. I came back from Portugal late and then right to this office space here and just connecting everything new. Yeah, so Portugal for us is really a very interesting place to put our strategy into real. We've been kind of studying from our past PV and wind and have implemented a lot of projects since of 2011-12. A lot of focus in Spain in the past. However, in the meantime, we saw really that hydrogen is something which gets us to the next level on the transition path as we get to higher percentages, as is obviously clear to most of us being in the sector now. And we can go to the next slide, Nadim, looking a bit into our motivation. In fact, the gap, and I will not go too much into detail. I mean, this is kind of the general background of our hydrogen activities and especially green hydrogen activities. But this study, and we're working here with Roland Berger together to also put everything in a nice, how can I say, global view, but also in the specific realization. So the CO2 emissions, which need to be reduced, and we are all striving here to make a change to the better for our future, well, will somehow not happen without the green hydrogen. At least this is our view. Hydrogen is really the one closing the gap. It's not the one and only. There's a discussion we have very often, like, oh, we don't believe in hydrogen, it cannot do this, it cannot do that. Yes, it's true, but it can do a lot of things, and without it, we will not reach the target. That's, I think, the essential message, and the gap which needs to be closed. Well, if it's kind of a 50% of the gap which is missing, which we can do through green hydrogen, because we cannot electrify the total industry only. There is a feedstock, there is other processes which need to be decarbonized. So hydrogen is the right thing to do, and we are fully committed to that. Let's go to the next slide. And looking into where to do it, one key factor, and we heard that in the previous presentation as well, is the initial energy you need to do the electrolysis, and the LCOE is the essential part, so wind, solar, other renewable sources. And well, luckily Portugal has in Europe one of the best, really the best situations. Well, we have Portugal, Italy, and some other places which are also very, very nice in terms of irradiation. But there, obviously, the starting point for PV is the sun irradiation, and coming from the parts where we have a very good initial feed of this natural resource is essential to get to the lower green hydrogen costs, the LCOH, which we've been talking about as well, because it needs to become competitive at some point. And for us, how can I say, we want to, on the one hand side, scale the projects into the sizes where it becomes more competitive, plus we need to look into the best input parameters. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so just a few words on Smartenergy. Well, we are on the one hand side a developer, and we develop, build, operate renewable power plants. It's mainly in solar, also some wind, but we have now added, in fact, green hydrogen into our strategy. In fact, we see it really as a hedging, risk mitigation for the future. We don't know exactly how the future electricity market will develop. We see that the intermittency is adding to the equation more and more, and we need to have mechanisms where we can be sure that in the future the energy we produce and also the feedstock we produce can be used at the right moment, at the right time, at the right place, and hydrogen is the right thing to do. And so we see that this is really more than just the PV, which we're very familiar with, but it's really a more cross sectors. We always talk about the sector coupling. I hope, Nadim, you still hear me. I just had a message here, connection lost. Hopefully.
Yeah, I can hear you loud and clear. I can
Okay,
hear
fine.
the occasional pinging. I think it may be coming from
Yeah.
your end if there is a.
I think a colleague left a phone or something that was,
Yeah.
and she's not here. Otherwise, I would have run over to switch it off. Hopefully, it will stop at some point. Okay, so that's also one of the reasons bringing all these stakeholders together is also one part of the equation. It's not too much about who does what in a competitive manner. We need to build the ecosystem together. We are focusing on Portugal right now. We are also looking obviously in other countries, and we need to put all the stakeholders together as a team, a cross-sector team, and that's also the reason we are also taking part in this event right now and supporting it to make these kind of exchange possible, to discuss with each other, to share experiences, because the earlier we start with this transition, the better it will be. There is no reason to wait. It's the scaling effect which can happen now and not later. The longer we wait, the longer will time to get the competitiveness, to reach the competitiveness we need. And so I think these kind of exchanges we're having are essential for it. The gigawatt pipeline we're working on in different stages. Some are very mature, some are in the earlier stages. We are really looking into putting as much as possible hydrogen to it, and I'll explain a little bit how we are approaching this in the next slides. Well, one thing is that obviously we need a national strategy these days to get it started. I think the governments across Europe have well understood that it needs to have a governmental and very decisive push in the beginning. We've seen the different strategies coming out in Germany, Netherlands, others, but I must really say that Portugal has been really very early and very committed to this transition, and the national plan has a very interesting aspect. One thing is sometimes national policies are out, but it's not clear how it's been funded. And so I think here there is a clear strategy how this is funded from the Portuguese side. And second, it really gives a support, first of all, also to the production of hydrogen directly. And second, it also kind of gives an initial potential off-taking mechanism in a very good volume, which overcomes this kind of chicken-egg problem that you need to really work on the off-taking side in a very complex way to scale the volumes at the same time with the generation. And to kind of decouple these things is a strategy of Portugal to get things down. And the thing is that here we have natural gas grid targets over the next coming years and decades. And with that, actually, we have a great off-taking possibility for green hydrogen in the beginning. I'm not saying this is the only and best usage of the green hydrogen, but it kind of decouples this kind of initial situation that you need have a very complex project where from the generation to the off-taking, everything is in place in the right volume and timing to get started. And this overcomes this very critical issue. Let's go to the next page. So for us, really looking into this gas grid injection option, and here we're as said, it's kind of not too high levels in the beginning, 5%, 10%, but which don't need a very heavy investment in infrastructure or close, very, very little, in fact. The gas grid in Portugal is also quite up to date in terms of technology. So here we have the creation of commercial scale commodity type offtake market in the start, enabling these kind of large scale projects. The complexity is reduced. We can focus on our side. I mean, we are focused on our knowledge on generation, on PV, renewable power plants. And so we can use this as experience without getting lost too much in the value chain downstream and understanding everything in each detail at the very beginning at the same time. It's not that we're not caring about it, but I think it helps us to focus. It's a commercial de-risking. I mean, the bankability is an important topic, but having this channel enables our projects to be also in terms of financing, in terms of calculating the business model, a very clear and easy situation in our project. Looking into this, doing this on the first projects, it can be then replicated with the next projects. Again, we learn on the first ones, but we see that these shares are increasing over time, so there is more volume to come, and this is a perfect thing for us and others in Portugal right now to start their project planning or already be in the middle, in the early phases of these projects. And we can demonstrate the viability of the business model. Next slide, please. All right, so just talking a little bit about this volume right now to make it a bit more sizable. Well, this 5% of Portugal translates into roughly 24,000 tons of green hydrogen. And you can see here, there is also, to keep it very flexible, a certain range we can strive for where the support will be given. And you can also see here which kind of PV, if we would just do it with PV, how much PV is related to this hydrogen, roughly. I mean, it depends a little bit on how you run your PV and the electrolyzer, but roughly I think it's a good indication. And you see that this kind of initial volumes, we're talking about 600-700 megawatts, and this is actually the level or the order of magnitude of PV today installed in Portugal. So you can see this 5% translate to doubling what PV is today in Portugal. So it's really already an important step, but here we're talking just 2025 and looking into what's coming next. There we see impressive further volumes coming. I mean, the target on national policy right now is 2 gigawatts by 2030 of electrolyzer capacity. And this relates very well to the PV plants at the same time and other renewable energy sources with further development over time. And I think a very interesting aspect is having this very good situation in Portugal on the resource sun. It also increases competitiveness in Portugal for a variety of industries, which, if we look really in longer terms, will have changed. You know, the industries which today are having usually a typical location somewhere, they may change. Also in dependency, well, Portugal is a total, but also the specific regions where you can combine electricity generation and also hydrogen generation. I think this will be a real change over time, which we will see in the industrial sectors as well. Next slide, please. So in our projects, we have on the one hand side PV projects which are already planned before we started to look into hydrogen. They have secured grid connection, they have construction permits, some have started construction already, and now we are and then they have PPAs also in place. So we obviously think of, okay, would be still great to put hydrogen generation with it. However, the business case shouldn't be really worse than before in the total, as obviously there are investors, ourselves and others in these projects, and it will be hard to sell to say, well, we do hydrogen and you will lose your business case you signed up before. So here the frame conditions needs to be still positive, and we're working on this right now, that these kind of real shorter time opportunities, because here the PV side is already ready to go. We just in the with a big disclaimer, it's a big thing to do, but the adding of the hydrogen is adding to the total. Interesting is that we have projects where the grid connection is an issue, and there we can now think about adding, still going for them and looking into hydrogen generation. And the third is retrofitting existing PV assets, where you can think about later on adding now hydrogen generation. Next slide. Well, on the timeline, we look into first lead projects out of the pipeline, because, well, it's would be an impossible thing to start everything at the same time. Also, we have still some learnings to do. It's all we are doing is really new to industry, the scale of electrolyzers, the scale of the whole logistics behind everything. And there are important experiences to make on these lead projects we defined. Just to name a few, well, the large-scale electrolyzer technology, the sizing optimization operation modes, how you size electrolyzer, the PV, potential storage, the grid connection and everything. The water sourcing on the high 2 generation is an important topic, especially where there is water scarcity, like in Portugal. It may be different in more northern countries. On the other hand, there you don't have as much sun, so it's really goes together, great sun, but in this case also the water topic, we are really dealing intensively now with this topic as well. Permitting and licensing needs to be put in place for such combined sites. The support mechanism, as we mentioned, the off-taking model. And well, we have a project timeline. Everything goes right. By mid-late 2022, we could go live with a green hydrogen output. It's not the project start. We have started the project already, but it takes some time. I mean, we are building really here also an industrial complex for the electrolyzers. Let's look into the next slide, how we approach the site selection. As said, we have really a good pipeline of projects, but we try to, on the lead projects, not to take just the 2 best projects we have in terms of irradiation and situation on the connection, but kind of 2 very different ones, in order to study also, to take the chance to study that all the projects which are between, then we know what to do. Well, we have site locations in the center and in the north, in the Lisbon and really wider Porto area. We have good specific production, but quite different, as you can see. There is really 10% or more difference, which has a big impact, obviously. Then the distances to the gas transmission and distribution lines, river as a potential water source, wastewater treatment plants as a potential source, port as a topic for longer transport in the future, or export topics. Road, important, really important, not only for construction. Train, just to consider it. And how do we go for it? And the great thing is, and the value chain setup is set, we can just start without caring too much about the further value chain options in a gas grid injection mode. And we are looking into industry and mobility for these sites right now with various discussions. Next slide, please. So a consideration, which is we have a planned PV capacity already without hydrogen generation from the project earlier. And we are now thinking about adding the PV on top of what we have already permitted. And you can see here that an option is, and there are also kind of levels in between, but just adding 60 and 70 megawatts, so doubling the capacity by still keeping the grid export capacity as it was planned, and electrolyzer capacity, which is somehow below than the 50% of the total. We get to quite interesting results in terms of, the mixture, how we use the electrolyzer, having better loading factors, and also achieving a good level of LCOH. And this is that's kind of a hybrid mode approach. By the way, we're also then studying other sites which are just not grid connection, electricity grid connection. Well, the good thing is said that these sites have started construction. I mean, the lower just showing another side of ours, how the fixed situation is with fixed mounting. But on the north side, you see we have started construction in the early stage right now on the PV side. Okay, next slide, please. We mentioned it already, and I think I need to speed up a little bit. Green hydrogen is not yet very price competitive. We know about that. We've seen governments that are supporting this now, and in Portugal we have now a kind of clear picture how it's going. So the one thing is we have to have the support, we need to scale, and with scaling getting to other cost levels. And the second is, I think over time really this true carbon price needs to develop further in order to make a fair competition. And we saw already now in our approaches on the off-taking side that in the coming years, some industry really face massive issues in terms of their carbon emissions, which really corresponds to good money, huge money, and it only becomes good money if instead to pay penalties, you really invest into decarbonization. And in many industries, the green hydrogen is the path to go. Next slide, please. In order to keep the gap as small as possible, I just will mention the logistics distribution side. We are going a bit for the start, for sure, into as much as possible decentralized option of generation with localized as much as possible consumption, because transport, logistic of hydrogen, as we know, is quite a challenge on a large scale, can become competitive more and more, but initially this adds a lot to the total costs, so the production can be not the only major factor, but the transport logistics become, and so we need really to look into this as much as possible to start with. Next slide. Yeah, that's just an indication that looking into the sensitivity a bit about what is the price we can get when we generate, what is this CapEx subsidy. We assume here right now on the calculation 40 megawatt peak electrolyzer capacity and LCOE, and also in 40 euro per megawatt hour. And in order to scale, we know that such a new technology, the investors, the banks, the bankability, it needs to be based on a positive business case. And so here we see it really needs support in the beginning to get to a maybe low double-digit IRR level, which would attract investors to do not just one project, but many projects. And we also did sensitivity analysis on other parameters, which is obviously the LCOE, a very important factor. The electrolyzer costs today and in future, also important factor, not as strong as the LCOE, but still very important to get to where we need to go. Next slide, please. I talked a lot about the off-taking through this gas network and the levels we're here, but luckily this is just the entry point, and also the national strategy of Portugal already has set targets in the industry, road transport, waterborne transportation, also for road vehicles. And in hydrogen, we look rather to the heavy transport, long distance. And the good thing is with the top natural gas network, we have a clear path to put up our generation while we have our talks right now in the other levels below to prepare and scale the consumption with the transition in industry and transport mobility. So you can see here, we have this unique situation. No chicken egg problem. There's always this chicken egg always we have to overcome. Here we have a situation. It's been accounted for. Next slide. As we cannot go to all at the same time, well, we have focused on the hydrogen possibilities in the energy transition, and that's marked in yellow first. Energy distribution across sectors and regions, which is through the gas injection. But then the next one is renewable raw material feedstock in industry and mobility transportation. And in all that areas, there are projects on the way, which are in definition and will scale up over time. The need here, the consumption is really impressive. So there is a good need for green hydrogen. Actually, the questions very often I encounter in my various discussions with the team and other players is, well, are we really sure we're getting the green hydrogen? It's really, this is a limiting factor right now on the planning of these industries to go to really deploy these strategies. And now coming to my last slide, putting a little bit of examples to what I'm talking about in the off-taking side is, well, here's a bunch of options and possibilities in the mobility industry sectors. I mean, some may stay a niche for sure, but some of those will really be, I think, something to come and change completely how to see it today. I mean, electric buses, for example, fuel cell electric buses are something I'm quite convinced, or the long distance heavy transport through trucks, even trains. And then on the industry feedstock. So we have here industries which I know are all considering hydrogen. They're all thinking, where do we get the hydrogen in a competitive manner in near future? And the good thing is we have a situation where we can develop the generation and the availability of green hydrogen in parallel, while the other rest of the value chain is developed at its own pace. Thank you very much for your attention, and looking forward to further discussions now.
Many thanks, Christian. Thank you very much for your presentation. It's very good, very complete. And yeah, very interesting to see the development of your pipeline. I had a few questions come in through various different platforms. One was around off-takers connected to the gas grid. Are they industrial, commercial, or residential community users? And how receptive are prospective off-takers?
Okay, so on the gas grid injection side, the level of initial injection is meant to be in a level where the consumer doesn't really notice, whether it's industry or households, residential. It's just a little blending, which in the level we're talking about initially will not change the behavior in a way that is really noticeable except by really scientific measurements. So this overcomes the first years. While we're doing this in the beginning, I mean, obviously the transmission operators, distribution networks are studying the levels where things start to change. And one assumption is up to a certain level, 5–10%, this is going in a very smooth path. And then there is kind of a level where more changes need to happen, both on the transmission distribution lines, the valves, pipes, everything, but also on the consumer side, where the boilers and whatever is using it needs adaptations. And maybe then we go to a specific high percentage network at some moment, which are then in specific regions, and which then will develop over time, rather than having, you know, the 15, 20, 25, 30% gradual thing. I think at some point it might be difficult to do it this way. So I think a good option is to get to a certain point and then probably have dedicated specific higher level distribution. That was the first question. I think I'm not sure anyone on the second one.
Yeah, did you have to sign any specific off-takers for some of your initial projects, or have you signed some initial off-takers?
Yeah, so the good thing is the projects in the off-taking side are developing, let's say, in parallel to what we do. We have expression of interest, LOI discussions, which I am quite confident will come to the right conclusions and levels. The problem right now to sign something fixed like you would do PPA for electricity, we don't have yet all boundary conditions really fixed, which is also obviously the governmental support is one of those. The mechanism of the grid injection is being worked on in detail right now. So there are kind of missing parameters to make it fixed, but still the timelines and the projects are there on our side and on the off-taking side. So I'm very positive that this is coming together as soon as these parameters are set.
We're going to be calling them HPAs.
Mm-hmm.
I said, are we going to be calling them HPAs as opposed to PPAs?
Yes, why not? Yeah, why not? Good proposal.
Yeah. Just a question, because you mentioned heavy duty trucks and buses, and there was a question around the potential gains from the EV side to narrow the current advantage. And just to sort of take that point, really, you just mentioned you see hydrogen vehicles maintaining that advantage on the power to rate ratio, etc. Any sort of thoughts around that?
Yes, I mean, on the electric vehicles, we've seen kind of, how can I say, it taking off right now. The transition, well, I'm living mostly in Germany, and I see that also here the governmental push coming with the taxation of electric vehicles, especially for business cars, has changed the situation right now. They are all sold out. So they are really conquering the market and changing the situation, and they have an advantage compared to the hydrogen situation. very high efficiency in terms of, the energy you put in and then the energy which comes out again or really moves the vehicle. This is very much true for the individual cars. And most of cars are not used on long distance. So I think the fit here is perfect, and it would be, I think, a wrong approach to say, no, this we need now to move everything to hydrogen. I think can still, for some specific cars where you want to go longer range, you want to have shorter charging times, it's great. But when you go to the bus operation, you go to the truck operation, the train operation, where there is no electricity connected, the battery, especially also the lithium battery, which is really powerful, but for that use case, it's not adequate. You cannot get to the same level as with a fuel, really. So this is a real game changer from my perspective, doing this transport. And if you know how much we transport over the roads all the time through Europe, imagine this is all going to hydrogen based, this will really make a change. And so there I see a big potential and an advantage where the efficiency is only second order because the battery cannot do it. And overall, the efficiency still is good. If you look into the efficiency of a diesel, which always say, wow, it's great, even better than normal fuel, but still the efficiency of fuel cells is also great in this comparison.
Yeah. There's obviously many investors out there that believe that, given sort of the rise of Nikola's share price over the last month. But thanks a lot for your presentation. You're staying with us, and we'll take further questions for Christian after the next presentation, when we'll have time for a chat around the production side. So many thanks, Christian.